Okay. Hopefully I can see how many people are going to log in. Brigitte was supposed to log in. I don't see 13. Oh, yeah, we got 13 participants. There we go. Waiting for Brigitte to come on. Okay. Okay. Oh, there she is.
All right.
Hi, Brigitte.
And I asked Greg to bring me water. Hey, baby.
How you doing?
Yeah, all right. Where should I put the water? No matter where I put the water, you're going to see it.
Yeah, we're a lot of people are pouring in right now. I guess we'll give them 30 seconds and then we'll go from there.
Okay. How is the weather? Do you have snow yet?
Yeah, we got snow on the peaks right now. It's getting nice. It's really nice. It's nice and cold.
Nice. And you're cozy inside.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm so jealous. I follow the Teton and the Glacier National Park and, all these areas, because I love seeing the pictures and people post and it's like, oh, it looks so majestic and so beautiful. All, with the snow.
Well, can't wait to host you at our home. So hopefully that will happen soon.
Hopefully. Okay.
We're getting a lot of people joining in. Okay, so maybe we should just jump right in because we're going to have an hour on the button.
Yeah.
I know you're busy. You've been doing a lot of interviews, like a whole bunch. I understand you've done over 100 now in the last week or so. Is that true?
Yeah. Over the last 2 weeks. Yep.
It's amazing you still have a voice.
It's going. That's why I got the water before we start. Sucked up with a
Okay.
bunch of Halls cough drops, and here I am.
You're amazing. Okay. All right. I know we've got a lot of listeners so far. We've got 24 and climbing. People are joining. So, Brigitte, I am so honored that you can be with us, first of all. For the audience, I just want you to know that Brigitte and I are almost like siblings. We're both from Lebanon. We left in 1984, so during the height of the Lebanese Civil War, which started in April 1975. We both have very similar backgrounds. However, Brigitte picked an amazing route in her life. You went from 1984, then you moved to Israel, and you became a correspondent there. Is that correct?
Correct. I moved to Israel in 1984, became news anchor for World News, and worked in Israel from 1984 till 1989, going back and forth to Lebanon, driving an Israeli car, changing the license plates on the border when I would cross to Lebanon, take the Israeli license plates out, put Lebanese, French license plates on my car, drive to Lebanon, visit my parents, and drive back. But in 1989, I came to the United States.
Yeah, amazing. So 1984 is when I came to the United States, as well, right after the Marine Corps barracks bombing, which we celebrated 40 years yesterday. Unfortunately, they planted they planted 241 cedar trees in remembrance of the Marines that died that day as peacekeepers.
Wow.
Yeah.
I didn't know that. That's good.
Yeah. Yeah, and so now your background, you've been all over the world. You've been speaking. You've published 3 books. Just an amazing background. What you've achieved so far, and you've told your story many times. And now you have Act for America with over 2 million subscribers, and you really are on the geopolitical stage, explaining to people the truth of what's really going on in the Middle East. Absolutely fascinating. So.
Thank you. Well, people like us need to speak out. And that's why we are speaking out. People like you and me. And we have worked together even when we were fighting ISIS and we were fighting Al Qaeda, when you were still working, with the Pentagon at that time.
Yeah,
And people like us make it our mission to fight evil because you and I, Rudy, grew up in war. Our childhood was destroyed because of the war. A
correct.
lot of Christians come to America and they don't talk about their backgrounds. And most people don't even realize that there are Christians in the Middle East. Most people assume the Middle East is all Muslim. It's not true. Look, Lebanon, as you know, used to be majority Christian country. When you
Yep,
and I were born into the country, Lebanon was 67% Christian. The Muslims were the minority. We were Paris of the Middle East. We were the banking capital of the Middle East. We were open-minded. We were fair. We were tolerant. We were multicultural. You
yep.
and I know the Lebanon we were born into. Most people today, and even those who are probably watching us right now, when they hear Lebanon, all they think about, all they can picture is a terrorist hellhole controlled by Hezbollah, a terrorist army that has committed terror attack on 4 continents across the globe, funded by Iran. The majority of Christians fled Lebanon, like you and me. Let's face it. If Lebanon was still Paris of the Middle East, you and I probably would have never been in America talking
Correct.
about these issues. But
Yep.
that's the reality on the ground. And Christians are always suffering, and Christians are always expelled by the majority radical Islamists who have no tolerance for the minorities in the Middle East, including Jews and Christians and Yazidis and whoever it may be.
Yeah, so true. So true. So your approach is very much on the political stage. Obviously, my side, we focus a lot on the humanitarian aspect of helping people. We kind of go by the old Proverb 24:11 that anybody who's stumbling to the slaughter is where we extend a helping hand and try to build those communities and help people, poor people mainly, to survive. But let's talk about the Middle East and let's just jump right into it. Before we get to the hot topic that everybody wants to talk about, the current war between Israel and Hamas, there's a lot of disinformation out there. And you and I have lived it, the Lebanese civil war from 1975 to 1991. I mean, it all started with this Palestinian movement into Lebanon, destroying the politics and turning the country upside down, but most people don't know about that. We'll get to that in a second. So let's talk about a couple of things that are happening regionally. First of all, right now, we're on the brink of war between Armenia and Azerbaijan. The Armenian Christians have been persecuted. There's a lot of politics behind this that goes back to the Soviet era, but most people don't understand the level of persecution. As of an hour ago, Azaris from the Azerbaijan side have taken over three ancient monasteries that predate Islam and converted them to mosques, and they're systematically killing Christians. We're seeing this over and over again. And I know you know about what's happened there at the turn of the century. I'm sure you can speak to that.
And one thing I want to point out, Azerbaijan, they are Muslims. Okay, so we call people name. We give people name like the Turks or the Moors did this throughout centuries, or the Ottoman did this across the centuries, or Hamas did this. Let's talk about the common denominator in all these people, whatever we call them. They're radical Islamists who have no tolerance for minorities. Let's not forget, at the turn of the 19th centuries, at the beginning of the 19th century in Turkey, the Turks, Muslims, massacred 2 million Armenians. 2 million. And a lot of them fled to Lebanon. And now when you hear about what's happening in Hamas and Gaza, stabbing of a pregnant woman, cutting her stomach open, taking the baby out, the baby is still connected with the umbilical cord, and stabbing the baby and killing the baby. The Turks, the Muslim Turks, did the same thing to the Armenians at the beginning of the 19th century in Turkey, the same thing that Hamas is doing today. Nothing has changed. You and I come from Lebanon. Look at what happened to the Christians in Lebanon. Who can forget the massacre in Damour, Lebanon, one of the biggest Christian cities in Lebanon? The Palestinians walked in. This is back in 1975, 76. and massacred the whole town. The town hid in the church thinking we're going to be protected in the church. The Palestinians and the Muslims, they combined their forces. Obviously, it's not Christian Palestinians massacring the Christians in Lebanon. They walked into the town. They slaughtered the people. They cut out the woman's stomach open. They took the babies out. They crucified Christian men, cut off their genitals and stuck it in their mouth. The exact same thing that just 2 weeks ago Hamas did to the Jews in Gaza. Now, how come they all do the same thing? This is why people need to understand history and need to understand what's driving these radicals. Whether it's ISIS killing the Yazidis in Iraq, remember what they did to the Yazidis? The exact same thing. Whether it's the Muslim Turks doing the same thing to the Armenians in Turkey, whether it's the same thing the Palestinians did to the Christians in Lebanon, they're doing the same thing to the Jews in Israel. What people need to realize that throughout the Middle East, and I found this very quickly when I went to Israel and I worked for a news anchor in the Middle East based out of Jerusalem. And for those of you who are watching us from Israel, I worked out of Binyanei Hauma in Yerushalayim and lived in Mevaseret Zion. And when I would cover all the world media was based at the JCS Capital Studios in Binyanei Hauma. And we would see the reporting on what was happening on the ground. And we are seeing the same atrocities. And as I report on the news year after year, working in Jerusalem, I started realizing that what I used to think, Rudy, was a regional problem between a majority Muslim Middle East trying to kill or expel the minority Christians and Jews had become a worldwide problem. In the 80s, in 1986, when I was working as news anchor, from 84 till 89, we started seeing a rise of radical Islamic terrorism worldwide. And I started realizing that no matter where the terrorist activity took place, the name of the perpetrators were always the same: Ahmed, Muhammad, Hussein, Ali. The name of the victims were always Westerners, Christians and Jews: Terry Waite, Terry Anderson, Colonel Higgins, the Achille Lauro, the TWA flight, the Panam flight. And I can go on and on. Right. The world did not connect the dot. You and I understand what's happening to the Christians in the Middle East and to the Jews of the Middle East. Crimes perpetrated against them by the same people adhering to the same ideology and coming to the West. It already came to the West on 9/11, 2001.
Yeah. And the West opens up the door to them. It's interesting. And we're going to get to this, but I want to point out the fact that most Arab countries now don't want Hamas. They don't want the Palestinians coming into their country for this very reason. We open up the West, the West open up our doors to them, and then we see terrorism happening, and then all of a sudden we go, why is this happening? Why are they hating us so much? It's the same spirit behind it. But so let's go back. So we talked about Armenia just briefly. There's something happening in Armenia. Pay attention, for everybody that's listening right now, that there's a potential war that's going to be on the rise, but Christians are being persecuted right now as we speak. Now, back in February of this year, we had a massive earthquake that took place between Syria and Turkey, right? Over 15.3 million people impacted. Today, a bulk of them are still refugees. Now, a lot of Western aid came to the help. We did, I know we did, but some of the key Christian towns were impacted. Antioch, Ladiye, those are the areas that are ancient Christian cities. And a lot of these people are displaced. And guess what? The host nations in Syria and in Turkey are doing absolutely nothing for these Christians. They're left alone. The support is only coming, say, from Qatar or Saudi Arabia, specifically for non-Christians. So a lot of times we have to go in there and support these people that have no food, no water, no medicine, nothing. And this is in the greater context of the current war that's ongoing now with Israel. So the entire region is full of refugees. It's full of people that are being exploited, sex trafficking, organ harvesting. All these things are taking place within this region. And now we add on top of it the current problem that's going on and that's festering inside Israel with Hamas, with a potential expansion of this across border into Lebanon with Hezbollah, and of course with Syria. And a lot of Syria's got over 50 different factions that are supportive of Hezbollah and Hamas that are pouring from Syria into southern Lebanon in preparation for a battle. And most people don't even know that. So this is something very important for us to tease out. And I'm sure you're seeing it from your end as well.
Oh, absolutely. And look, Iran is getting weapons to Hezbollah from Syria through Syria. This is exactly why Israel last week bombed the Syrian airport, bombed the Aleppo airport, and bombed 7 trucks carrying weapons to Lebanon.
Yeah.
And so we know this is where the supply of weapons and ammunition coming from. And look, this is exactly how Iran supplied Hezbollah with all these missiles that they got. Right now, over 150,000 missiles, 150,000 missiles are directed at Israel from southern Lebanon, spread across 40 villages in South Lebanon, ready to rain on Israel. And the danger of that is because the Iron Dome can intercept a few bombs at a time. But when you're going to launch thousands of missiles per minute from Lebanon to Israel, it's going to overwhelm the Iron Dome, and we're going to see a lot of casualties. And that's exactly why Israel vacated all these towns. Over 43 communities in the north of Israel were vacated because of the war with Lebanon. This is the scary thing. Hezbollah has anti-warship missiles that they have already demonstrated. They did a video last week showing off how they're going to attack our ships in the Mediterranean. They have drones loaded with ammunition. This is why it is so dangerous. Hezbollah is the war with Hezbollah is on a whole different level than the war with Hamas.
Yeah.
And that's the scary part. And now, because America is viewed as weak on the world stage, as you know, everybody knows we have a senile president. Everybody knows we have an airhead, what I call NyQuil and a suit. I mean, the guy is just, he's no longer there. Other people, handle him. And so, the rest of the world is not blind. I mean, our own people in America may be blind, the Democratic Party, who think the rest of us are idiots, but the rest of the world are not idiots. Putin is not an idiot. China is not an idiot. Iran is not an idiot. North Korea is not an idiot. And that's exactly why the Chinese, if you are China right now and you are watching what's happening in the Middle East, and what do you think? Do you think that you're going to wait from invading Taiwan until maybe President Trump can get elected in 2024? Of course not. They all looked at the senile Joe Biden and weak America, and especially after the debacle in Afghanistan and the withdrawal, and they realized we've got 4-year window of opportunity to do whatever we want to get done. All the bad actors in the world, and that's why they are working together to create a counterbalance to the United States. Our ships in the Mediterranean are not deterring Iran. They know we are a paper tiger. Our ships in the Mediterranean are not deterring Hezbollah. They're not deterring China. They know America is not going to do diddly squat, no matter how much we have pumped up under a democratic leadership, a country that's afraid of war. We have a very weak military. We have wasted our ammo. We have depleted our oil reserves. That Biden did. What are they going to afraid? America is weak economically and militarily, and they know it.
Yeah, so true. And where Hezbollah has stationed itself in the southern part of Lebanon, there are small enclaves of Christian towns like
Yes.
Ramesh, like Ain
Ain
Ibil.
Ibil.
Ain
That's
Ibil,
right.
yeah. Yeah.
Marjayun, Lay'a, this is
Yeah.
my region. That's where I grew up. By the
Yeah.
way, where are you from in Lebanon?
I was born in Ashrafiyeh, but
Okay.
my family's from Arsun.
Oh, blue blood all the way.
Yeah, all the way, all the way.
Christian blood all the way for 1,000 years.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely, for 100%, kind of like you. But
Yeah.
those areas now, Ramesh and Ain Ibil, and all these areas now are being used as potential human shields against against an attack from Israel by Hezbollah.
Yes, because what Hezbollah has done is Hezbollah put their weapons depots under schools and under churches and under medical clinics in those towns, shelling at Israel, knowing that when Israel shells back, the Christians are going to be collateral damage. They don't care. That's what they did in Marjayun. So they have been doing this systematically. And there's not many Christian towns in South Lebanon. The Christians are the minority. South Lebanon is majority Shiite, unfortunately. But speaking of Shiite, by the way, If we can learn one lesson from this Israeli-Palestinian conflict, and this is something, Rudy, you and I have been talking about forever. We
Yeah,
knew that. But I think Americans are waking up to realize, wow, Hezbollah is Shiite, Hamas is Sunni. We thought the Shiite and the Sunnis are each other's throat. But
yeah,
here we see that the Shiites and the Sunnis are working together as one against their enemy. How can this be happening? This is a teachable moment. When you look at the Middle East, when the Islamic Ummah declares war on their enemy, Ummah, all the Muslim nations come together under the banner of Islam. They will put all their differences aside. There will be no difference between Shia and Sunni. They will all come together to kill and attack their enemy. And so what you're witnessing right now is a perfect example of how Iran and Saudi Arabia can find a way to work together. If really we're going to get into a big war and into Armageddon, make no mistake, they will all line up together behind the Islamic cause, including Egypt, which has a peace treaty with Israel, including Jordan, which has a peace treaty with Israel. Look what Saudi Arabia just did. Cut off everything with Israel, all the negotiations. They were on the verge of signing a deal together. All it took is an attack by Hamas, named the flood of Al-Aqsa. Once you invoke Al-Aqsa Mosque name, the whole Muslim Ummah will come together worldwide, regardless what sect they belong to.
yeah. Yeah, although there's some cooler heads prevailing, hoping that Saudi Arabia does not go completely off the reservation, but comes back and negotiates, according to, remember, the Abraham Accords really brought a whole bunch of Middle Eastern countries together in peace with Israel, that the hope was that Saudi Arabia would come on board. And it was very close, as you said, to having a peace agreement with Israel. But I think the Saudis are starting to realize that these Hamas guys are they're butchers. They're very radical. And it doesn't bode well for them either, trying to modernize right now.
Well, look, remember, this is Saudi Arabia we're talking about.
Yeah.
They've got an executionist on staff paid for by the government who beheads people for crimes, okay?
Right.
In the 21st century.
Yeah.
Most people, think that modernization means big buildings and big shopping centers, like what they're doing in Dubai and all these things. People don't realize that people like you and me cannot go visit the Medina in Saudi Arabia because we are considered filthy. We're not even allowed to enter those cities, the Haramain, because, we are infidels according to Saudis. Not even George Bush, not even Hillary Clinton, it doesn't matter who is the president of the United States and how much they love Saudi Arabia. They're not even allowed to enter those cities because they are considered najis. They are considered infidels,
Right.
Under Islam. There are uncomfortable topics that we in the West, people in the West shy. They do not want to talk about because they are uncomfortable. You and I come from the Middle East. You and I grew up with the statement, أولاً يأتي السبت وبعده الأحد. First comes Saturday, then comes Sunday. First we kill the Jews, then we come for the Christians. We've
Right.
heard that since we were 10 years old, you and I.
Yeah,
Since we
exactly.
grew up
Yeah.
all over the Middle East. So the West needs to wake up and understand the monster we are fighting. As long as we can show Saudi Arabia that we can protect them from Iran. Right now, they do not feel protected. They felt protected under President Trump. They
Right.
knew that Trump was an ally they can count on. And that's how Trump was able to pull together 50 leaders, 50 presidents, 50 leaders in Saudi Arabia and hold the summit that he had, where he was welcomed like a king, like one of their peers was welcomed into the country. They knew under Trump, America could be counted on as a friend. If he said to them, I'm going to protect you from Iran, they knew he will protect them from Iran. And that's why all the Arabic nations lined up and said, okay, we're going to do a deal with Israel. We're going to recognize Israel. Look, right now, there are flights between Dubai and Tel Aviv. I hope the Abraham Accord right now is on its last breath. It's on life support, watching what's happening in the Middle East. I pray to God we can avoid a major war.
Yeah.
You and I grew up in war. You and I are the last people in the world who ever want to see war. We know the price of war. Look, I was injured. I'm not sure if you were injured in the war, Rudy, but I was injured and hospitalized in the war. and ended up living in a bomb shelter. I'm the last person who wants war. But, this is why we pray for peace in the Middle East right now. We're heading into war. War is going to be ugly. I just pray that it's not going to explode into World War III at this point.
Yeah. Yeah, my house took 3 rockets. My father was kidnapped. They exchanged 3 people for his release. So very similar.
Kidnapped by whom?
by the people we're talking about.
By Muslim radicals.
Yeah, exactly. By the offshoot of Hezbollah, by the beginning, Hezbollah started in 1982. He was kidnapped by them. And then they exchanged 3 people for his release. Why? Because he was part of the Christian militia in defending our territory. So yeah, we lost a lot during the war. It was horrible. And here we are, trying to explain to the world. Now, one thing most people don't understand, and especially, I go back and forth, I'm sure you do, with friends in the Middle East, people that you grew up with, that you love. They've been brainwashed over time, especially in Lebanon, by Al-Manar and all these media from the Hezbollah side, with the billions of dollars coming from Iran, essentially that, oh, Hezbollah is your savior of Lebanon. The Hezbollah guys are the ones that are, and then the poor Palestinians, we need to support Hamas. Well, guess what? Hamas's charter is very clear on no negotiations, full destruction of Israel, killing all the infidels. Hezbollah carries the same water over and over again. And most people forget that the war in Lebanon that started in 1975 and lasted over 16 years was because of these radicals that came into the country, not caring about who we were as people, as Lebanese people. Instead, they turned it into war and then systematically started slaughtering us. You talked about the Damour massacre that happened in 1976, where 586 Christians were massacred, just like Hamas just did, coming out of Gaza into Israel. So the brainwashing is incredible, but maybe you can talk specifically about Hamas and how, in Gaza, they basically elected Hamas and put them in power in 2007 because they all feel that Hamas was the way to go. And Hamas's charter is clearly there. No negotiations, annihilate Israel just as it is.
Exactly. Look, most people don't remember that Israel withdrew out of Gaza in 2005. And people like me were absolutely against it. I remember giving hundreds of interviews when Israel withdrew out of Gaza. Israel withdrew out of all of Gaza. Their citizens did not want to leave. They dragged them. I mean, if you remember the images that was played on the media at that time, they dragged them kicking and screaming. The Israeli army turned against its own people, dragging them out of Gaza. Not only they abandoned their homes, their greenhouses, the industry, Israel dug out its dead who were buried in Gaza and took every Israeli bone and remain out of Gaza. So by 2005, there wasn't even any Jew alive or dead. Even dead Jewish bones were dug out of the graves because the Israelis did not know how the Palestinians are going to react. They get an idea. You and I know what Muslims do to cemeteries of Christians, breaking the crosses, digging the bodies out. They did the same thing in Lebanon to us. And so they do it to the Jews. So that's why Israel withdrew them all out and gave Gaza to Hamas and said, here, you take it, you manage it. They left them the greenhouses. Look, Israel used to import so many of the world vegetables, tomatoes, flowers. 50 million flowers were exported out of Gaza annually when Israel ruled Gaza. So Israel withdrawal out of Gaza, they leave all the greenhouses to the Palestinians. And I know a Jewish businessman in New York, a lefty with all good heart, raised $14 million and gave the Palestinians $14 million because he wanted them to start fresh and have the money to grow and have the capital to grow their industry and continue to prosper. The Palestinians, within 24 hours of the Israeli withdrawal, not only burned 125 synagogues within 25 hours, they destroyed the greenhouses. Not just destroyed the greenhouses, they stole the copper out of the pipes and the faucets. They destroyed them. These people shoot themselves in the foot. They could have turned Gaza into Singapore, but failed. Why? Because they're blinded by hatred. When they held the first election in 2006, one of the most famous cabinet members that was elected was called Nidal, the mother of the Mukawama, the mother of the resistance.
Yeah.
And why did they elect her? Because 3 of her sons blew themselves up as suicide bombers in Israel, committing terrorist attack, killing Jews. And she ran on the platform. I sacrificed 3 kids. I have another 7 to kill, to sacrifice. That's why she was elected. The Palestinians in Gaza are Hamas. There is no difference. We in the West try to justify, well, it's a radical minority. It's just these Hamas members who are bad. But the rest of the Palestinians in Gaza are good. Who do you think Hamas is? What do you think? Hamas is just a minority that flew through the breeze into Gaza and kind of latched onto some flowers and building and kind of said, okay, we're just going to sit here. But the rest of you are so wonderful, peace-loving citizens. No, that's not the case. The Palestinians in Gaza are Hamas. Hamas controls the Ministry of Health. Hamas controls the Ministry of Defense. Hamas controls the Ministry of Education. Every single ministry in Gaza is Hamas. Hamas command and network center is under the Shifa hospital in Gaza. Everybody knows that. That's not a hospital. That's Hamas's command center, an operation center. So
exactly.
The Palestinians in Gaza are Hamas.
And what do you say to people when they say, and these are the arguments that I hear is, oh, they're stuck in Gaza, they can't leave, it's a big prison, they have nothing. I'm like, really? They get billions of dollars. It's laughable. Exactly. It's laughable. They get billions of dollars, as you said. They could have turned the place into a beautiful area. Instead, they wage war. In fact, they cut their own water pipes to turn them into rockets to fire into Israel, and they go, we don't have any water.
That's right.
Yeah, those
that's exactly it. You know, they shoot themselves in the foot. Like I said, they could have turned Gaza into Singapore. They were completely independent. Israel didn't have a blockade around them. Israel didn't erect walls. They wanted to leave them alone and say, okay, finally, we're going to have peace. We're tired of them shelling rockets at our towns in southern Israel. If we just give them Gaza, the shelling is going to stop. We're not going to lose any people. They're going to have their own thing. Let them prosper. Let them have it. But the Palestinians turned around, and all the assistance that they got, all the money that they got from the world, instead of investing it into building schools, building hospitals, building educations, building universities, starting commerce, building on what the Israelis had accomplished in there. I mean, look, the Israelis left Gaza as an oasis in the middle of the desert. Exactly. They destroyed it. They destroyed it. That's not the fault of Israel. Look, I remember when I worked in Israel, like I mentioned, I worked from 1984 till 1989 in Israel, and I worked in Bnei Hauma. My favorite place to go to dinner was in Bethlehem. I would drive to Bethlehem Hamburgers, and I would have dinner at least twice a night, twice a week, and Bethlehem Hamburgers. There was no wall between Israel and Bethlehem. We drove our cars. It was peaceful. I will go there. I will eat dinner. I will go shopping. You know, I will go there on the weekend. There was no wall surrounding Israel. Why did Israel build the wall that now the Palestinians complain about? Because they were shooting at Israel. They were bringing suicide bombers at Israel. Yeah. They were shooting at Israelis coming to work, at even Palestinians coming to work in Israel. Israel had to erect a wall to protect itself. But who brought that about? It was Palestinian action, not Jewish actions. And every time the Palestinians misbehave, they drive themselves into a worse corner than they were in before. And that's the problem.
So walls do work.
Walls do work. You know, as sad as it is. I mean, I went back and I visited Israel in 2018, and I had not been back since I left in 1989. And so I went to Israel. I wanted to take my children back to Israel because my parents are buried in Israel. Most people do not know my parents are buried with Oskar Schindler on Mount Zion.
Oh,
Before
wow.
I left the Middle East, I wanted to make sure that my parents are buried in Israel, not in Lebanon. I went back to the cemetery, dug out my mother's body. She had already been dead for 18 months, put
Mm,
her in a casket in my car, and drove her to Jerusalem to
mm,
bury her with my father in Jerusalem, because
wow.
I wanted to make sure that my children yet unborn will always be drawn to Israel and not Lebanon.
Yeah.
So I went back in 2018 because I wanted to take my children and visit my parents' grave. And I remember driving around, we went, from Jerusalem to the West Bank. And I have to tell you, we drove to Ariel, which is an Israeli settlement. And that was sad for me as a Middle Easterner, watching the wall. We were driven in a bulletproof bus. And it was sad to see the Palestinians suffering. I felt bad for the Palestinians driving in a bulletproof bulletproof bus from Israel. I felt bad for them because I had seen how much their situation had deteriorated, and
Right.
it was not right, and it broke my heart. But then, like again, when I lived there, in 1989, there was no wall. They were freely driving into Israel, freely coming and working in Israel. No problem whatsoever. So every time the Palestinians took action against their Israel, they shot themselves in the foot and their situation became worse.
Yeah, absolutely. And most people don't know that, like, when you look at Israeli politics, that the Knesset has Arabs in it. I mean, people don't realize that, there's a fairly sizable Arab population in Israel that support Israel and that fight alongside Israel, including, from Jish from the north, Lebanese people when that were on the Israeli side of the border that now fight with the IDF. There are, I mean, a lot of, quote unquote Arabs, although as Christians we don't consider ourselves Arabs, right? That are on the Israeli side. So I'm sure,
That's right.
yeah,
Look, I grew up in the security zone, which was the buffer zone that Israel had, that Lebanon now calls occupied. It used to be occupied territories.
yeah,
It wasn't occupied. It was we Christian going to the Jews and saying, "Hey, the Muslims are going to slaughter us. We want to work with you. Can you please help us out?" Israel coming in into
and
Lebanon
helping
and
out.
helping the Christians stay alive. Look, I remember when I was 13 years old, in the middle of the war, when the world forgot about us. It was Israel that came to help the Christians. I remember at the age of 13, one of our friends stopped by and he said, "Brigitte, I just want you to know that tonight we heard a lot of chatter on the radio and we believe tonight we're going to be attacked and we're going to die." And he said, "If I don't see you tomorrow, I wish you a merciful death." And he left. And I remember at the age of 13, Rudy, putting on my Easter dress, my Sunday best, my burial dress, because I wanted to look pretty when I am dead, knowing that when they come to slaughter me, there would be no one to bury me. And I remember sitting in the corner of our bomb shelter, and my father started reading from Psalms. We had a 2-hour ceasefire. And my father opened up the Bible and started reading from Psalms. "I
Mm.
shall walk into the valley of death and fear no evil, for thou art with me." And my parents said to me, "We lived a long life. You are an only child. When they come to slaughter us, you just run towards Israel and don't look back." You see, my town, Marjayun, is 2.5 miles from the Israeli border.
Yeah.
And we knew if we go to the Jews and beg for help, the Jews are not going to slaughter us because we had more shared values with them. And that's when few people from my town went to Israel, begged for help, and Israel started coming in the middle of the night, set up artillery bases around our town, and Israel started taking Christian men from Lebanon, training them how to fight in Israel and bringing them back. Because Rudy, the Christians in Lebanon were not the street fighters. We were the educated ones. And so Israel trained the Christians how to fight, and Israel will bring them back. I come from that Christian buffer zone. And I remember after the election of Bashir Gemayel, which, Syria killed because they knew the first order of business, he was going to sign a peace treaty with Israel. And I remember when they assassinated him. And even after he was assassinated, when I moved to Jerusalem and worked in Jerusalem, we had the Lebanese embassy in Migdal Megiddo across the Knesset. I used to spend evenings and dinners at that Lebanese embassy in Jerusalem. The Christians who opened up the embassy in Jerusalem, hoping that we're going to continue the Bashir Gemayel legacy of having peace with Israel, that we're going to continue having relations. I remember driving across the Knesset and watching the Lebanese flag flying in Migdalei Megiddo. Most people don't know that. The Christians were afraid to publicize it because Hezbollah was gaining power. That's when Hezbollah just started. Iran looked at Lebanon. They saw a lot of Muslim fractions everywhere. And Iran said, hey, I'm going to bring them all under one umbrella, and I'm going to call it Hezbollah, and I'm going to fund them, and I'm going to support them. And that's how they created Hezbollah. The Christians got to the point by 1985 that they were too scared. And by the end of 1985, they closed the embassy and left and went back to Lebanon. I knew the people that worked at that embassy who are now in Lebanon, who would never even dare utter that they used to be in Israel. But you know, it's sad. It's a missed opportunity. The Lebanese did not want to have a war with Israel. We were working towards peace, just like the Egyptians did, just like the Jordanians did. Lebanon was going to follow, and the Syrians knew it. Iran knew it. They assassinated Bashir Gemayel. The Christians were too weak to fight, and we just could not move forward.
You know, my mother worked with Philippe Habib before he passed away on the peace agreements. And my father was supposed to be in the same meeting with Bashir Gemayel. He was killed in Ashrafiyeh, just not too far from where we lived. In fact, he had just missed that meeting because he was pulled to another meeting, and he would have been killed. He would have been killed in that explosion. Same time. I mean, that's the level of hatred that was coming against us. But the interesting thing is now we're so divided in terms. When I say us, I'm talking about not only Middle Eastern Christians, because the number of Christians across the region has dwindled significantly, and the ones who have not been able to leave now have been stuck in this environment, and a lot of them are constantly bombarded with disinformation, misinformation, you know, all that stuff coming from Iran, Hezbollah, Hamas, all this stuff. And then all of a sudden you have this distortion of information that when you talk to Christians from that part of the world, they're almost like, oh no, haram, everybody, it's okay. You know, we need to be peaceful with everybody. They forget the roots of the killings and the assassinations and the torture and the everything that we were put through. And this is where we are today. And now Israel is facing,
that we were put through. Our generation, you, me, Dr. Walid Faris, who also another Lebanese prominent speaker in the United States. There are many of us who went through this war. What's happening right now, ever since Israel withdrew out of Lebanon and Hezbollah took over, and they brainwashed all the new generation since 2000. So since 2000, you have a whole new generation of Lebanese who are totally brainwashed. To the point where, and across from my hometown, there's the town of El Khiyam, which is all Shiite. Right. In El Khiyam, we had a prison where we put all the wannabe suicide bombers who wanted to come and blow us up. That's where we put the radicals of the radicals in that prison. We treated them humanely. You know, Christians don't torture. Jews don't torture. You and I know that. Right. And so we treated them humanely. They were in the El Khiyam prison. They were the worst of the worst thugs. These people who wanted to blow themselves up to commit terrorist attack, that's where we put them. So after Israel withdrew and all the Christians from southern Lebanon fled to Israel, and a lot of them are still living in Israel. Now they have Israeli passports. Hezbollah turned the Khiyam prison into a museum. And now what they do is they bring all school children from Lebanon on a field trip to the prison museum to show them the atrocities of Israel and the South Lebanese army and what they have done to the poor Muslims. Poor Muslims, that's where we put wannabe suicide bombers. That's where we put terrorists who want to slaughter and kill and cause mayhem on innocent civilians. They were the worst of the worst, and we treated them humanely. We treated them with dignity. And so now Hezbollah has a lying propaganda machine that has brainwashed school children in Lebanon, Christians and non-Christians, since 2000. So we're talking now 22 years. So kids and even more. So I want to say kids from 30 and under, because even the 30-year-olds, the 5-year-olds don't remember anything when Israel withdrew. They had just started kindergarten. So now anybody 30 and under in Lebanon goes to El Khiyam prison as a part of their schooling, as a museum to the torture that Christians, supposedly, people like you and me and anybody who was a Christian fighting to survive, and the Israelis tortured these prisoners. So they're totally brainwashing them. And so that's why you hear so many Christians who are misguided in Lebanon right now. And I'm so glad you brought it up, because my followers on social media, this is probably thousands of questions, the exact same questions. How come the Lebanese Christians in Lebanon hate Israel? Not all the Lebanese Christians. It's only people under 30. People our age in Lebanon are afraid to breathe. They love Israel. They are rooting for Israel in this war. I hope so many Israelis are watching us right now, because I want you to know that anybody in Lebanon over the age of 40 are rooting for Israel to go in and kill Hezbollah, smash them, get them out. It's anybody who's under 30 who's brainwashed. The rest are on your side.
No, you're so correct on that. Although you do have onesies and twosies that are our age that drank the Kool-Aid, and more or less is probably for economic reasons. Versus,
we know a couple of them.
Ideological reasons. But when you point out the atrocities that that Hezbollah and Iran and Hamas are doing, they stop and think, because they remember back in the Civil War how much we went through and how much we lost, really. I mean, look, you and I came out of no electricity, no water, bomb shelters, no chance to go to school. You probably the same thing. We used to light a candle and read at night while they were shelling us.
That's right. And we studied for our exam only 24 hours before the exam, because we did not know if we're going to be alive to take the exam. I studied for my exams the night before. Boy, it was a 24-hour shift. Okay, I'm still alive. It's 24 hours from now. I better get studying, because we've got the exam tomorrow. We understand. Look, people like you and me, I still walk around with shrapnel. See this? I have shrapnels in my bone. This is where a shrapnel cut my artery. I look at my body when I take a shower in the morning. I have the scars of war. You can't erase that. We know the price of war, and we hate war. Again, look, somebody like me who still has shrapnels in their bones, I'm the last person in the world who wants to go to war. But sometimes war is necessary. It's like when the doctor tells you have cancer and you want to avoid surgery, and oh my gosh, I really do not want them to go operate. I really do not want chemotherapy. Maybe I can take Tylenol, that will calm the pain. Well, sure, you can go the Tylenol route, Panadol, or whatever you call it. If you're watching us internationally, you can go the painkiller route, and that will kill the pain until your cancer gets to stage 3 or 4. By the time it gets to stage 4, no matter how much you did in the pain for 4 years, at stage 4, that cancer is going to kill you. So you are better off going in at stage 2, doing the surgery, getting cut open, getting the cancer out, getting stitched, going through chemotherapy. At least you have a chance to survive for the rest of your life and eliminate the cancer that is guaranteed to kill you the more you let it go. And I think with Israel, with Hamas, they tried to appease Hamas. They thought, oh, it's a little bit. They underestimated Hamas. They underestimated America's policy towards Iran, which will funnel money into Hamas and funnel money to Hezbollah. And right now, the monster is so big, you have got to go in and uproot it. And it's going to be painful. It's much more difficult than if Israel did this operation back in 2005 or 2010. It's a totally different war right now.
Yeah, we're talking about stage 3+ right now, and surgery is only required. There's no other way around it. So we've got almost 5 to 10 minutes left here, and what I want to do is switch gears a little bit and say, well, how can people help? Because I will share on the Blessing Projects, what we're doing to help, but also from your side, Brigitte, how can people help? How can they get involved?
Okay, so Yeah, this is the wonderful thing about you and I coming from different directions. So I work the political angle to
Yes.
ensure peace through strength, and you work on helping the people. So we're going to talk about what I do, and then we'll talk about you do with a
Sure.
beautiful ending note about the Blessing Project. I decided after what happened on 9/11 in the United States to start an organization to fight evil. To whom much is given, much is required. It is no matter what challenges we go through in life, we are called to serve. Every challenge and tribulation that we have gone through are nothing more than a stepping stone so we can come into our full being, so we can meet our destiny, so we can serve humanity. In my case, I wanted to stand up and fight evil, and I understood how important it is to fight evil, applying pressure on governments and elected officials to make the right decisions. I started Act for America right after 9/11 because I wanted to educate millions of uninformed Americans about the threat of radical Islam to world peace and our national security. And I started traveling and I started speaking, and it became very clear that we can educate until the cows come home, nothing's going to change. Education is important, but education by itself is not sufficient. Education must be coupled with action. I started Act for America to basically mobilize people to impact policy. I'm proud to tell you that today, Act for America has over 2 million members. We have helped pass bills, 210 bills on the federal level in Congress, as well as on the state level in different states to secure America. To give you an example, right now, we have a bill to expel Rashida Tlaib in Congress. We want to censure Rashida Tlaib. Somebody like that has no business being on Congress. We have a bill to stop the acceptance of any Palestinian refugees into America. We want 0 Palestinian refugees from being brought to the United States. We have a bill right now to put a cap on universities on accepting any Middle Eastern students, on foreign students. Right now, all these demonstrations you are seeing of Palestinians in the street screaming anti-America and anti-Israel are majority foreign students in our country. We don't need them. So I encourage people to go to actforamerica.org. I named the organization Act for America. Not think about America, hope for America, pray for America, or wish for America, but act for America. You can think and hope and pray, but without action, nothing happens. Go to actforamerica.org right now. Sign up to receive our emails and action alert. Stand with us and support our work in any way you can. Become a member for a tax-deductible contribution. You'll be notified about bills coming down for a vote, as well as you can be engaged. And with that, I turn it to your blessing project so people can know how they can bless others.
Let me share. I think we have a couple questions. I don't know if we got time for these, but let me share your, we created this QR code here. There we go. People can see it. They can scan it immediately, and they can go directly to Act for America. And in terms of the blessing projects, all I can tell you is we are focused on helping communities, very poor communities that have nothing. In Lebanon, we're helping orphans and the elderly in those towns of Ramesh and Ain Ibil. We've been sending food to them.
The Christians, they need help.
They need help. They have nothing. We've helped people in Israel, victims of the attack, the recent attack by Hamas. We're helping a lot of Christians inside Iraq, in Israel, in Syria, in Turkey, in Armenia. We are all over the place, essentially feeding people. We start agricultural projects. We have school projects, orphans. We try to get them education. So we are on the ground, essentially the humanitarian side of things. And we are helping people so they don't starve to death, so they have a future. Because I look at you and me, Brigitte, in a way that we had an opportunity to come to this country, and we turned out the way we are because we had this opportunity. So for these people, we try to give them opportunity where they're at. Many of them are too poor to travel. They're too poor to afford. So that's what we do. And the QR codes on the right of your screen are essentially the way to get to our websites and to get involved with what we're doing. Now, I'm going to read you, we've got a couple of minutes. I'm going to read you one from Hank Kopel, he said, I totally agree. The terrorist savagery is driven by Hamas and the Palestinians 24/7 hate indoctrination of their people. As my book, War on Hate, argues. So what steps do you recommend to stop the manufacture of terrorists via hate indoctrination? For start, shouldn't the free world bomb and disable Al-Manar studios and broadcast towers? I think that's what Israel did in 2006, right? I think this
Yes.
next war is gonna require that. So do you have anything specific you want to say to that on
Oh,
stopping the indoctrination?
I agree. We've got to stop the lies. You've got to bomb their media. They've got a propaganda machine. They've got a propaganda media machine that they are exporting to the world. You've got to outroot all these terrorist organizations, but the most important one is Iran. And what's happening in the Middle East right now is a direct result of Biden opening the purse strings and flooding Iran with money. Remember what he and Obama did with the Iran deal. Trump came in and he immediately suffocated Iran, cut off. I mean, look at the restrictions he did to Iran. Look at how he tried to stop their funding. You know,
Yeah.
Biden came back and opened up the purse string. I think the most important thing we need to kill is Iran, who is funding Hamas and funding Hezbollah. But the immediate action is going to have to be taking out the terrorist organizations. And it's going to be a bloody war and it's going to be terrible, but it's a war that must be fought.
You think I mean, Hezbollah is already day by day launching rockets and showing more and more this aggression. I feel that that's gonna explode at some point. Do you feel the same way?
Yes, I do. And I already told my friends in Lebanon to get out of Lebanon. I've been texting them all last week.
I did
Have
the
you gotten
same
your
thing.
visa to Australia yet? Have you gotten, just go to Cyprus. You can fly to Australia out of Cyprus. You can fly to Canada out of Cyprus. Get the heck out of Lebanon. So yes, Hezbollah will get involved in the war and Iran will get involved in the war.
Yeah. Just for those I'm going to throw this out as a last piece because there are a lot of people that are doing their own research and everything. I just want to just to illustrate everything that we talked about of the level of hate that we're dealing with here. Just about a month and a half ago, Israeli Mossad foiled an attack against a Jewish community in Cyprus. It barely made the news, but you can search it out. It's there. The constant targeting and assassination attempts and stuff like that, it doesn't stop. It never has stopped, but it's culminated to this now. Unfortunately, Israel is going to have to do after this war, which I think will last about a year or so. After this war, I think they're going to go back and really look at intel failures and all that stuff. But for now, a lot of people are going to suffer. And from our side of the house, Brigitte, I think we really need to make a difference here in the United States, and we need to support our brethren on the other side.
Yes, I agree, Rudy. I agree. This is going to be a long war. We need to stand on the side of what is right. The Western world cannot support barbarism. We've got to stand together, united. And we've got to understand that you have to always be engaged and aware in protecting your democracy, your republic, your country, your military. You always have to have military readiness. You cannot squander your pearls at the feet of swine. You cannot squander your weapons, your machinery, your military force on other people's wars. You've got to be able to be ready to protect your own community. And that's why I encourage people to stand with us and support our work, whether Act for America or the Blessing Project. And it is so amazing, Rudy. This is so wonderful that you and I, two Lebanese Christians who survived the war, are speaking the way we are speaking. We need more voices like us speaking out the way we are.
Yeah, amen to that. I think there's going to be more to come, Brigitte. I know you're very busy. You've been very gracious with your time, with your stories. We love it. We love you very, very much. And God bless you for everything that you do. And can't wait to do this again.
Thank you, my friend. I love you. Can't wait to see you again and have a great day.
Love you too. God bless everyone. Take care. Bye-bye.